Creating fantasy worlds and games is no small feat, but imagine doing that in a real world conflict. Well, Signum Games has been bringing players rich and immersive worlds, all the while facing challenges most games developers will never face. So let's check out their latest game, Warseer. I'm Peachy, and this is Peachy Tips. Now, Signum Games has been a company that's been on my radar for a little while. They've been producing amazing figures well before and during the war in Ukraine. They're based in the Ukraine, by the way, if you're wondering. And they reached out before Christmas and were telling me about their new game called Warseer. And I was like, well, yeah, I seem interested. There was a game previously called Legends of Signum. They sent a copy. I didn't really do much of it at the time. The models are amazing. But they hooked me on this one. They were like, Peachy, by the way, we do solo play. I was like, oh. Well, anyone that's a fan of the channel knows I like solo play. So, and also I'm a big advocate of shining lights on small indie companies, boutique companies, or companies that just aren't like the big hard hitters like Workshop. And it's nice seeing all these different creatives. But what really got me was the challenges this company has to face whilst doing this as a job. I mean, I've worked in the games industry, and it can, you know, you get your ups and downs on a weekly day, but not quite the same as Signum Games have to face. So I was like, yeah, I'm interested, but also, you know, I want to make sure it's a game I'm kind of keen to look at as well. So they sent some stuff through, which I'm going to talk about in a bit. I'm going to pick some figures up, but I just thought it'd be quite nice just to you know, shine a light on this company that's working really hard, trying to make a successful games company whilst having to deal with being shelled from time to time. So I reached out and asked about like what is a daily kind of like day for you guys? How does that work when you're in the middle of a war zone? And they're like, well, it's kind of tough. When they did one of their Kickstarters, a game called Fantasy Commander, they lost the internet when they were doing the Kickstarter at launch, so that was a bit stressful for them. In the early days of the war, when they were being shelled, their city was, one of their staff members had to go around the office collecting everyone's hard drives so they didn't lose all their information, which was quite risky. But yeah, they're saying recently at the moment, usually they hear a bomb once a day. Sometimes when they start to hear 2 or 3, they're like, is that in the city? Is that on the outside of the city? Let's go and sit in the corridors away from the windows, and then we'll just have a cup of tea or a coffee and wait for it to settle down. But I think that's testament to them as well, because obviously with everything that's going off, they're making good quality card content. The art's amazing in the game as well, but also the miniatures, the quality of the miniatures is really good. When I was spraying some of the models, because I'll come to the sets very shortly as well, because you can pick your factions and stuff. When I was spraying the models, I was like, oh, I'm going to do this faction. I'll spray them green. I'll spray them all green because I can just like either keep them all green as an option, and then I can add paint to them as time goes on. I dropped one. This happens. Sometimes that happens when I've got a model sprayed and like the tackiness on the double-sided, because I always tack my stuff on with double-sided tape on a spray stick, and it fell off. And I was expecting it to shatter like glass. A couple of bits broken off. The tail broke off a bit. The shoulder pauldron broke off and the axe head broke off. And I glued it together, and you wouldn't even tell. That's why I glued it together wrong on the base. I purposely, honestly, made sure that it wasn't on the base properly, just so you knew that it had been smashed, and it had been smashed. So I was quite surprised by that. But yeah, the quality of them is good. It's quite a robust resin too, which is reassuring if you drop it, if you're a klutz like me. Now, these games come fully decked with everything you need, from card content, tokens, dice, all the stuff that you would need to play the game. You have the option of just using the core game itself, so you don't get any miniatures with it, which is fine because all the rules are free as well, so they're downloadable. But you can just use your own models if you really wanted to. You can like substitute whatever like character that is in the game for your own version of a model. Maybe you want to use an Age of Sigma figure. Regardless, that option is there. But their figures are really, really cool. So I don't know why you do that. When you are picking your starter set, you have the option of which factions you pick. So you get this cool drop-down menu. You select which ones you want. You could have, in theory, 2 of the same faction. So like take the Iron Nest or the Hansa Vallar, which is the ones I've got. You can probably have like both versions if you wanted to like build up your force more and play the solo campaign, which is probably something I could do with like other sets as well. Or if you and your opponent both like the same faction, you could do that too, both play the same faction against each other, also possible. Now the solo play version does come with its own set of extra cards, a campaign book. These obviously will be used in a different sort of dynamic than what you would if you're playing like 1 player versus 1 player. But yeah, you can play the game like 1 versus 1. You could do like team matchups. You can do free-for-alls. You pretty much can do anything you want, really. And of course, obviously the solo play option, which is what I kind of like looked at when I was doing my filming. I as it's me, I tend to be a bit rubbish when it comes to reading rules, and it takes me a little bit of time to let the rules digest. And one of the things I like to do is I like to read through the rule book, play through like a turn or play through a section of the rules, like what's the activation phase, how does that work, oh I forgot this phase, right, let's skip back and try that. So that's often how I play a game, is I'm just like working my way through the rules. At first I was like looking for a particular rule, but it's the book is so well laid out, it was just me not looking at the right page at the right time, because I was skipping ahead. There was 2 books to concentrate on. What I would say, if you are doing the solo play, is read through the rule book first and then go to the campaign book. I kind of like jumped to the campaign book because I was like, oh, this is the solo play rules. But no, it is, and it's all the stuff you need to know how to play the solo play, but you do need to know the core mechanics as well. So I was getting a bit ahead of myself when I was reading the rule section, but it's really, really fun from a Peachy coded point of view, because it was quite a relaxing game. I like the fact it's got elements that reminds me of Magic the Gathering, because you have all these cool cards that have like different effects. So you've got like terrain cards, you've got city building cards, you get relics and this, that and the other. So you've got a cool deck of cards. Depending on which faction you pick as well, you will get some cards that are relevant to your faction. And then obviously you customize your deck and then use that. And then during the game, obviously, you go through these cards, recruit characters onto the battlefield, and then just generally just play a fun game. The character cards themselves remind me a bit of Warcry. And then, of course, with the hex-based system, it has like Underworlds, certainly with the dice as well. You've got Underworlds vibes, Warcry vibes, and Magic the Gathering vibes. So if you like all those games, this is perfect. If you like one of those games, it's easy to pick up the other ones quite quickly as well, because normally I'm not like a big hex game fan, but I actually really enjoyed this because it removes like the tape measure element. You just like, I just moved so many hexes, which is great. Very simple, very hero questy actually, which is also the other reason why I sprayed all my faction like green, because I was like, oh, I'm going to go down the hero quest route. That makes sense. Now the 2 factions I got, faction 1 is the Iron Nest Empire. It has 2 factions available when you are getting the starter sets. This is the Iron Nest Empire faction itself, led by Anna Dark, Hope of the Empire. So you get a bunch of characters in there. Really like that model. These feel a bit like Empire meets sort of like Sigmarite elements, because it's almost like a flagellant looking guy. Also Sister of Battley as well. I like to think of like other examples to help my brain work out like, oh, I can see these influences and this, that and the other. But it's just a good selection of different figures. And also I love myself some Griffhounds, and there's like a little Griffon next to Anna Dark, and I was like, yeah, I like that. So I'm going to paint her up. What I also had in my mind was like, I could fit these into my Warcry warbands. Maybe I could use these with my Sisters of Sigma warband. That would be interesting. How would that work? Would that fit? The models are slightly larger. They're 35mm scale, but I did work out or find out later on that you can actually get them printed in 28mm if you choose to. So that opens a whole load of options for me for things like Frostgrave, Rangers of Shadowdeep, even stuff like Silver Bayonet. So I'm very excited by that as a prospect too. Now the other faction I got is the Hansa of Vallar. When I looked at these, I love the fact that it's got like almost wood elfy kind of vibes, but also citizens that live in those kind of environments too. So if Age of Sigmar's Living City had an actual bespoke range of figures, this would be it. Because you get like cool centaur people, you get cool looking like dudes with crossbows, just a whole bunch of weird and wacky creatures as well. And I was like, oh, I like this. The character's like a big snake wizard guy. Seems really friendly looking as well. So I was like, oh, that's quite cool. The model I dropped was just an armored dog warrior. I was like a big fan of dog warriors, like that. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the crossbow dudes. And although they're slightly larger in comparison to the Sigmarite stuff, they're not that much bigger, probably like half a head height or so. So I could easily fit these into my Living City Warcry warband, which is kind of the angle I was painting this centaur guy. I mean, I think he's half sheep, half man, half ram, half man. He looks mega. Ram man. He's Ram man. That's what he is. Don't know if he is Ram man. I wonder what that tastes like. Centaurs. I mean, what do they taste of? I'm just, it's one of those things I'm just thinking about, like, because he's half sheep and half man. Is like he half mutton and half pork, like gammon-esque flavour. I wouldn't know. I don't eat human flesh. I don't know what it tastes of, but certainly ate lamb and mutton before. But yeah, I don't know. Is it beefy? I don't know. Makes you wonder. Speaking of beef, Signum Games, I got beef with you. When I was unboxing this Warseer set, as I was lifting the lid up, on the side it said Napoleonic, Steel and Magic. And I was like, what? Whoa, there's a Napoleonic game. It's not available yet. Kickstarter's kicking off soon. Nice. So I'm very excited about that. very excited indeed. So I'll certainly be supporting that Kickstarter launch. But yeah, I was like, ooh, I like this. And the fact you can get them as 28mm figures, that's going to be perfect for my Silver Bayonet. But yeah, there's just a lot of cool models to look at and appreciate. And if you're not even into playing the game, just really good fun to play and paint up for different games. Like I said, Frostgrave, 5 Leagues on the Borderlands, or whatever you want to play, or even like your Age of Sigmar games and your Warhammer games. There's stuff here that would fit really well into that, because you got like, well, cool looking vampire models, you got cool looking like ogre looking beasts and stuff like that. So there's so much choice. Now, I initially painted 2 figures for this video, one from each of the factions. I wasn't going to do both of the main characters, but I really like the Ram guy. I was like, oh, I just want to paint the Ram guy. He looks cool. Some of the footage was a bit blurry, and I'm going to have to redo some bits on it. So I didn't put them in here. I'll probably add that as a Patreon video later on down the line once I've corrected some bits and bobs. So if you do want to see that at some point, that will be probably in the next few weeks added to the Patreon. And that's like what the lowest tier is, like £3 or something like that. So if you did want to know how to paint my Living City scheme, the greenie scheme, that'll be on there soon. But yes, I decided I'm going to paint Anna Dark and the Griffon, because I want to paint the Griffon because it's lovely. But then I thought, actually, you know what's really handy is when you've got multi-base models, how do you go about painting those? I see a lot of people glue the models onto the base together, which is fine because they're then glued together and then you just paint around it, but that can be quite tricky, makes it hard for getting those nooks and crannies, also when it comes to basing. So I thought, you know what, I could cover that in this video, just have the 2 models separate. So I left the Griffon where it was initially going to be properly on the base anyway, so I just glued that where I wanted it, and then I got Anna Dark ever so slightly tacked onto its own little base, and then I could paint her quite easily as well, so I'm not like getting like robe colours accidentally on the Griffon and vice versa. But also when it comes to basing the models as well, I've got a little hack for that. So if you want to see how that all works, stay tuned for the paint guide, which I'm gonna do now. Start off with a silver undercoat with Anna Dark and Midwinter Ice for the Griffon, because I had that spray and it was perfect because I wanted a nice light bright blue. But yeah, let's crack on with some painting. So over a silver undercoat, the first thing I'm going to do is start base coating that undersuit of Anna Dark. So I'm going to use a colour called the Darkness, which is perfect because I want like a bluey kind of grey kind of tone, and this is the right colour for that. I also want the robe on the side to be a little bit brighter, so I'm just going to get all these undersuit bits base coated. Then it's a matter of picking out any kind of leather areas like the boots and belts and stuff. I'm just going to use black for that. Again, it's the early stage, so I'm just going to just base coat them, not worrying too much. Mostly with black, I tend to not bother doing much highlighting with it, especially when there's lots of other colours around. There's just no need. You can do, but from a speed point of view, I tend to not bother. But yeah, it's just going around, picking out any straps, and maybe adding a second coat if you need to. Also, key point as well is I like to just every now and again, you can do it near the end, but I sometimes like to keep up with like touching up if I've made like splodges here and there, especially like the silver, because I might forget. If I don't do it now, I'll probably forget. Then that robe, I'm just going to start base coating with Abyssal Blue. I do like the sort of turquoisey colours that Army Painter do, and they've got a nice spectrum of tones. So I'm just going to start off with this first as a base coat. It goes over really well over that silver as well. So this is just slightly thinned down, like not much water, but a little bit. But it covers really, really well. Just like one solid coat. It's amazing. The pigment in the Army Painter colours are really, really good and cover really, really well. Then I'm going to get some gold. I was umming and ahhing about what kind of tones of gold. I was like, should I go for something a little bit more like white gold or like a bit more tarnished? But I quite like bright, vibrant gold. So that's why I decided to go for this one, because it's nice and bright, and we like bright. That's why it's called bright gold, because it's nice and bright. But yeah, just work your way around, pick out all like any, well, it's up to you really. I'm picking out trim here and there. And sometimes that's the thing as well. You start doing sections here and there and you think, shall I add a bit here? I wasn't so sure about that big castle design on the side of the leg. At first I was like, shall I paint that gold? Shall I not? So I kind of left it silver to start off with because I wasn't entirely sure if there'd be too much gold. So, and that's part and parcel sometimes when you are painting. Sometimes just hold off if you're not so sure about overwhelming the model with colour. But in the end, I decided, yep, I'm going to paint it gold. But the one thing I did do was I slightly thinned it down, so when it kind of went over that section, it kind of just pulled into the recesses. So it's a little bit less punchy than the other golds around it, and also as it dries, the raised areas will just look silver. So just a nice way of using the same colour, just slightly differently. That's often why I tend to spray things silver when I'm using lots of golds. Now this neck thing, wasn't quite sure what colour to do that, and then in the end it kind of looked a little bit more like padded armour, a bit like the pauldrons you get with clone troopers and stormtroopers. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to paint that as leather. So I decided instead of doing black leather, I thought I'd do it the same colour as the undersuit. Sorry for this really bluey section there. And then it's just a matter of picking out the face. Initially I was just going to paint the face, and I thought actually I'm going to go for like red hair, because I'm going to paint my Anna dark a little bit different. Not quite sure what colour hair she has now, I think it's blonde, but I thought, you know what, I'll just use that flesh as a base coat over. I'm sure the orange will be fine over silver, but just to be on the safe side, I'll base coat it with a nice light colour and just use flesh for that, since I was doing the face anyway. Then for the hair, I decided to get some molten lava and paint that. And with that flesh kind of colour underneath, it kind of just went over a little bit easier. I think if it was silver still, I might need to have done a second coat. But really, with the molten lava over the paratrooper tan, it just worked really well. So, little top tip there. Sometimes if you're not sure about what colour hair, just paint the whole head flesh and then decide after. Now, another thing as well is I was leaving the haft of the weapon because I wasn't sure if I was going to do it black, leave it silver, or do another colour entirely. So again, a bit like the castle design on the tasset on the side, I thought I'd leave it and then see how the model looked when all the other colours are on. And I decided to paint it black. Same with the handle of the sword as well. And as always, I like to coat my models in wash, and this is the big wash that Army Painter sent me, so why not coat the model in loads of strong tone, which is what I'm doing. I love strong tone. It does dry quite shiny at times, which is totally fine because, well, we can fix that after because we can layer back up and this, that and the other, but I do like to douse the models in wash. But it's great with lots of metal models because you want it not to be dull. You want it to be a bit shiny in places, certainly for the armour. And there's a lot of armour on Anna Dark here. And as always, when I have washed, I do like to go over and just check nothing's pooling, watch as I call it. So I'll just get a slightly smaller brush or whatever and just soak off any excess if needed, or move it around the model if it needs a little bit more in other places. Next is to tidy up. Now you can leave your model with it just covered in shade, or if you want to add a little bit more love, this is what I'm doing here. I'm just going around with a bunch of base coats. So the colours I've already used, I'm just reapplying those to the raised areas. Two reasons. One, it's going to matte down some of those colours a little bit shinier, but also, I mean, you could use matte varnish, I guess, but also it gives it an extra bit of a highlight as well. So again, I've said this many times, but from two colours, so a base coat and a wash, you're getting almost 3 different tones from it, which is great. But yeah, work your way around, take your time, enjoy yourself, and don't get too stressed. And if you do make a mistake, don't worry, because it's paint. You can paint over it. It's the beauty of it. Just add a little bit of silver here as well to add a bit more bling to some of those areas. They are quite shiny anyway, but just on some of the raised areas, I thought I'd just add a little bit more punch to that colour. I thought I'd just go around the edges with the silver a bit more to really emphasise it's a slightly different goldy kind of metal. I mean, making armour out of gold is probably not wise. Now, this is a bit more risky, but I'm going to get some shining silver. I'm just going to do a very subtle dry brush. I'm using a really old battered brush here for this, but it's very small and I can have a bit more control. So I'm just going over some of those larger metal areas and just doing a little flick of a dry brush. But you don't have to do that. You can always just get a small brush and just apply those highlights if you want to manually. But actually, when you've got like quite a lot of armour sticking out, you can get away with it a bit more. It's up to you. Then I got some strong skin tone and decided to apply that over the gold. I quite liked it. It added a bit more punch in those deeper recesses. Certainly when you start adding a bit more here and there. And originally I was going to use it for the face, but I thought it was just a bit too dark for the skin. So I kept it to the gold, and then I thought I'd use like a speed paint instead for the skin. It's called Crusader skin. So I'm just applying that now. I'm also going to apply that to the hair as well. And then I thought, I quite like the tone of this. Maybe I should have added that to the gold instead. So I thought, why not? I'll add that to the gold as well. And it just gives it a little bit more punch. So I've got some nice dark tones in the gold, but also some slightly warmer tones as well. Again, you just pick one, you don't have to do both. This is more like me just testing the model as I was doing it. Now, after any touch-ups and tidy-ups, I'm now going to move on to some highlights. So here I'm going to use some tidal blue just to highlight up the robe. So in places it's going to be quite broad strokes, in others, depending on the folds of the cloth, I might just do a little bit like smaller, using the edge of the brush where possible. Also doing those little jaggedy highlights as well, because you can make the cloth look a bit torn, because definitely it's very torn at the bottom. Then after that, I'm going to use some shield wall blue just as a final highlight. Again, just picking out little edges here and there, and then doing my little jaggedy highlights that I do like to do. It's one of my favourite things to do. It's really, especially if you've got shaky hands. And I did have quite shaky hands when I was doing this. I think it was just a bit too cold. But, you know, in shaky hand mode, you can still get decent highlights by doing the little jaggedy highlights. Then I got some Abyssal Blue, which is this colour I use as the base coat for the actual robe, the light blue robe. And I decided to use that as a bit of a highlight on that undersuit, all that sort of darker, bluer leather work that I've got going on. So just picking out the odd fold here and there. Not going too mad, just having a little bit of fun with it. Be as precious or as neat as you want, or just pick out the odd one here or there. I tend to do that with smaller details that go in the recesses. I tend to just pick out the little details. Now, something you can do if you find your highlights are a bit too bright, or certainly if it's really bright in some areas and really dark in the recesses like I've got here, especially if some of those recesses are shiny, I'm just going to get a speed paint. Now, this speed paint is Thunderbird Blue. I'll be using this later on the Griffon, which you see in the background there, which has already been painted to a certain stage, but I'll show that separately. But yeah, I'm just applying that. And when that dries, it will dry nice and matte, and it'll just give it a little bit more of a gradual blend as opposed to being like really dark in the recesses to really bright on the raised areas. Very much like a glaze. Now, I'm just going to quickly jump in here. Big apologies. When I was filming this next section, which is painting the eyes and like the lips and stuff like that, it looked like it was in focus. All the peaking lines and stuff were there, and it seemed like, I'm looking at my camera now, it's like, oh, it's all in focus. I can see all the peaking lines and this, that and the other. I've got loads of like yellow dots around my face. Had the same thing with Anno Dark. Pans out, when I was editing, that was not the case. So it is blurry. If you don't want to watch it, totally understandable, but some bits are in focus, some bits aren't. So if you do want to like just quickly see how I paint eyes and stuff, then that's option. It's more of a disclaimer, just like, really sorry, it's a bit blurry. I could have redone the paint job as well, started from scratch again, but the problem there, I guess I have to strip the whole model, because you repainting over those bits would then get a bit streaky, and I was like, I don't really want to do that. I don't want to make that cool up close-up model look really streaky and gunky, so that's why I just kept with what it is. So apologies. Anyway, back to Anno Dark's face. But what I'm going to do here is, first of all, is just get some black, drop that into the eyes. It's my way of doing it. Don't have to do it that way. And then I'm just going to get some white and do little slits, little horizontal slits. And then what you can do is, because you've almost got like a bit of an eyeshadow, like eyeliner effect, is just get some flesh and just go up to the cheeks, in case you're, and especially around the brows, in case your black's a bit too stark. And then just do a little dot or a line for your eyeball. And then it's just a matter of just painting the lips. And then just use some red contrast of your choice for the lips, or a red paint. It's entirely up to you. Now, to begin with, I sprayed the Griffon with Midwinter Ice, which is one of the Colour Forge sprays, and I'm just going to do a big old dry brush of that, and I'm going to be using Neptune Glow all over, because it's a slightly lighter blue, and it almost has a bit of a creaminess to it as well, which is quite nice. So it looks a bit more natural. So I'm basically just going over quite heavily, dry brushing, because you've got lots of texture on this Griffon cockatrice. I'd say it's a Griffon. It's hard to say. Pretty though. Now, with that dry brush done, I'm going to get some gold, just base coat. So again, this is like the early stages, just going to block out all those armor sections. There's quite a few. There's some that are really, really deep down inside the legs, and I couldn't really see it when it was like on the tabletop. So I just didn't bother with it. And same with some straps as well, some straps deep down there. So when it comes to painting those, I'm not going to bother either. So that's sometimes a thing you could think about, is you could stress and try and paint it and try and really get into those nooks and crannies. But if you can't see it when you're actually even painting it at this angle, there's no point. And also I'm just going to get some black and use those for the straps. So again, some base coat. Again, if I'm making mistakes, I can just get some of that Neptune Glow and then just touch up any areas if I need to, which is what I'm doing here. Any little dots and stuff. Because sometimes the gold can have a mind of its own, or if I'm just being a bit shaky hands, which was the case on this model. Maybe old age. Don't know. So what I'm going to do now is get some Thunderbird Blue, which is the colour I use as a glaze on Anno Dark's robe. And I'm going to apply this all over the feathers. I've also decided, you know what, I'm going to apply it all over the gold as well, because it's going to make it look a bit more tarnished and old. But also, later on, when I've done some dry brushing, added some washes to the gold, you're not going to notice it anyway. So it's a really nice way of being not too super neat when you're doing a big all over wash. You can just be free of worrying about getting things on the gold and touching back up and this, that and the other, because the gold will look after itself. Then I'm just going to get a little bit of black. I thought, actually, you know what, I'll pick out those eyes. So whilst I'm still at this point, I'll get some black, pick out the eyes. Should have done that when I was doing the straps. Did forget. Oops. Sorry for the shaky hands. With that speed paint dry, I'm just going to get some of that gold that I base coated with and just pick out some of the raised areas, just little bits here and there. I'm not being like super neat and doing highlights. I'm just like blocking out the odd little bit that could just do a little bit more bling, or when the light's going to catch it. It's just going to add extra depth when it comes to doing a wash on the gold in a bit. And then just for a little bit more punch, and then I'm just going to dry brush over some of that gold with a little bit of shining silver, because when I apply the flesh wash in a minute or two, it will just knock that back a little bit and give it a bit more of a goldy kind of feel to it as well, so it's not too silver. So that's what I'm going to do now, is get some of that Crusader skin, which is the colour we've used on Anno Dark's hair and her face. I'm just going to apply that, not everywhere, just in some of those deeper recesses, mostly just to emphasise the cool details on the gold armour. But yeah, I'm just working my way around, just applying it, have fun. Again, if you splodge, you can tidy back up with some of those other colours. So at this point, I did think it could do with some more colour on the wings. So I decided to have a look through my speed paint box, and I found something called Periwinkle Purple. I thought I'm just going to have a play. So I'm in experimental mode right now, so I'm just going to apply this over the feathers. Might change my mind, might add an extra tone, I don't know. But I just thought I'd break up the shape of that blue a little bit more. It was just too blue, too cold and very samey and flat, I guess, as well. So adding this Periwinkle Purple around on some of like the ears, some of the feathers, around like the mane on the neck as well. This would really fit well into Warcry as a model. And just a little wing it's a Griffon with wings in it, really. But yeah, just working my way around on those feathers, applying that colour. But with it dry, I quite like that, so I thought I'd get another colour. This is Moonlake Coral, and I thought I'll apply that over. When it dries, it's got a bit more of a pinkiness, but still falls into that kind of periwinkle purple tone, but that's fine. I thought I'd just play around, apply it. I can always dry brush back over or apply a second coat on the wings and stuff. I do like it. Does it give it a slightly different tone for sure. And in some places it was still quite wet from the previous. I didn't obviously leave it to dry long enough and it kind of merged in a bit, but that's fine because it's quite nice that colours blend together, especially when they're speed paints and contrasts. That's kind of like a nice thing actually. Gives it a nice natural blend. Just got to be mindful not to do it too much. Then I decided to do a second coat of the Moonlake Coral on some of the other upmost feathers, and I kind of like that. So it's a bit more of a gradient, I guess, but you can experiment with colours. You can use layers, base paints, whatever. Do what you want. Thin down a little bit of that coral there as well, just on some of the, I guess, extremities. But yeah, it's just about going around the model and just breaking up the shape up a bit. And I didn't go too mad, so it's quite subtle in places, less subtle in others. But I just like the effect. And again, just playing around with some of those places I've already put, like the periwinkle purple around the eyes, that kind of thing. And I just, yeah, I kind of like the look of it. Worked for me. I liked it. It kind of reminded me of the old Griffons I did for my Warcry armies and my Age of Sigmar armies. So I was kind of using that as a guide. Then I got a colour called Marine Mist, which is one of the lighter turquoise tones. In fact, I think it's the lightest. I just did a little dry brush over the extremities of the wings. Just add a little bit more punch to the wings and really showcase that texture. And I also use that same colour on the beak as well. It looks quite bony, strangely, which I was quite surprised by. But I just thought I'd go around, emphasise the eyes, really sort of like make the beak and the eyes draw your attention towards them, because you've got some nice colours around there. I just thought it'd be a nice way to really help focus those areas, because, you know, faces and bases makes a model aces, as they say. I say they, I don't know who they are, but they say it. I say it. Right, now I want to stick Anna Dark onto this model, but I also want to base it. So what I'm going to do is stick some masking tape down and then basically apply my texture to the majority of the base, because it is a multi-base model, and I sometimes find when they're glued on already they're hard to paint, but they're also really, I'll come back here, you, but also they're really, really hard to base, because you've got two models you've got to work around, and there's so many chances of it going horribly wrong. So without her on there and a little bit of tape, I can just freely get into some of those nooks and crannies on this little Griff thing. Cockatrice, don't know what it is, let me know in the comments. Now in some places when you are applying like the textured paints and stuff, you are going to get it on a model, and that's fine. If you just get a brush with a nice point to it, add a little bit of water to it, you can just remove most of that, especially if it's still wet. If you leave it too long and it dries, then you have to repaint it. Then just get some tweezers and pull off that texture. Clean up the feet, because I've taken off a base now, because she was on a separate round base. Add a little bit of glue, and then just stick her on that void. Obviously that is worth planning ahead. You know roughly where she's going to go, which is why I put the masking tape where it was. And then I'm just going to work that texture around her feet. So I'm only just doing a little bit now. I'm not having to worry about the whole model. Just saved me getting all those nooks and crannies behind her, basically. Just a really simple way of solving that problem and not getting too stressed, because it can be quite stressful when basing, so certainly with textured paints like this. If you're using PVA and sand, less so. And then all I'm going to do now is apply some rust tone. I really like rust tone. I use this for a lot of my fantasy bases. So just applying that over, add a little bit of water in places, so I make more use of the colour. It thins it down in places as well. Same places quite a lot. But yeah, just work your way around, take your time, let it dry. And then all I'm going to do is get myself some ancient stone and then dry brush that over. So just a nice little dry brush in place. Originally I used a larger brush and made some mistakes, a bit too heavy, so I went for the smaller brush like I used for the silver details, and then just use that. Then just get a rim colour of your choice. I like to use like a nice mid-tone earthy brown. Then once you've done a couple of thin down coats of that for a nice smooth finish, just get yourself some grass tufts of your choice and apply them around. That's the fun part as well, is just adding those little details in. Try not to overthink it as well. The great thing with using smaller tufts is you can make some patches a little bit bigger and different shapes and sizes, whereas like Citadel ones tend to be very similarly shaped, so it becomes very weird looking. So that's why I like to make my own shapes. So there we are. Anna Dark, Hope of the Empire, is now done. And you know what? I'm really pleased with the result of her. It is like a quick character paint job, and that's the thing here, is like painting characters really quickly for me, for like getting them on the tabletop, because you've got quite a lot of cool characters in the set. With this particular faction, they are a little bit eclectic as well, because you've got like a flagellant looking guy, you've got like weird guy riding armored chicken, some Sisters of Battle, Sisters of Sigma-esque looking styles as well. But I think using the same colour palette across the whole lot will help tie it as a unified force, which is the exact same thing I'm going to do with the Hansa and Vallar. I sprayed them all green for a purpose, which was, I'm going to keep them all green. Even like the lady who looks like a Maid Marian, or like some kind of queen from like, or even like the Fey Enchantress from the Bretonnian army, I'm going to keep her green, probably add like some yellows in there, maybe some burgundies for like some of the cloaks and stuff. But it keeps it together as a unified thing. I think that's a very Peach coded thing, and I've talked about this with my Frostgrave videos, where I like to have like a uniformity to my colour schemes. Maybe one day I'll try and be a little bit more eclectic and have like every colour under the sun. Louise is very good at doing that. I'm terrible at doing that. I like uniforms. I like everything to be the same. That's probably the military history sort of army painter in me. Don't know. But I like them. I'm enjoying painting them, and I foresee myself doing more stuff with this as well, and including it in different games. And that's something that's, I think I really appreciate about what they're doing, is the option to have them as 28mm. I know I've said it already, but I think that's so good. And there's a couple of companies that do that as well, like We Print Miniatures. I guess like My Mini Factory, you can get them printed in different sizes. And of course, if you have your own printers, you can do that. You can make those choices yourself. But I just like that option, because if you get like plastic kits from, I don't know, like Workshop, they are what they are. And as much as I like the Stormcast, maybe I want like that model a bit smaller, so I could fit him in with like, I don't know, my Barons War stuff or whatever. Not that I would probably use a Stormcast in Barons War. Regardless, going off on tangent. But their factions, they have such a wide array of factions. You can have vampires. You can have a collection of Sphinx, a collection of genies, gladiatrixes, little halfling people, sexy witches. Who doesn't want sexy witches riding brooms? I certainly do. That's going to be a Halloween project. You got weird looking creepy Christmas people. It's wild the amount of things you can have, and I love it. Particular favourite I found in my box was this guy. He's just a whale with a cannon being loaded by a squid. I mean, what more do you need for a model? That'll fit well in an Ogre Kingdom's army. That would fit well with a pirate army. I foresee this guy turning up to help Richard Sharp in an episode. Maybe I'll call it Sharp's Whale. Nah, it's a bit lame actually. Maybe Sharp's Catch. No, it sounds sleazy, because it sounds like he's like after a lady. Maybe Sharp's Seaman. No, I won't do that. That sounds like something else. Anyway, I've rambled on enough. Thank you very much for getting this far and watching this video. Hope you found something useful in it. Massive thank you to Signum Games as well for reaching out, sending me the set, but also being super honest and candid about their experiences. I could have said more, but I didn't really want to put too much of a dampener on the video. But I also wanted to talk about it as well, because I like to shine lights on companies, but certainly if there's a company that's working incredibly hard to make a business work inside a Warzone conflict, that's got to be tough. So if you can find a moment of your day just to check out the website, maybe even purchase something just to help them out. You know, they reached out and they're like, Peachy would like to sponsor a video. I was like, send me the stuff. You're not paying for the video, because you can use that money to repair your windows. But yeah, I just want to shine a light on this company, because they have got a great blitz attitude. They're super resilient, but also really hardworking and just lovely people. And I think they deserve to be noticed in the hobby sphere a bit more. Some of you folks have obviously subscribed to them, or you know, already joined the Kickstarters, so I know there's a few who've already reached out and said, oh, I really like their models, their game's great. I really like the game. I was a bit on the fence initially about the game, because I always get a little bit sort of apprehensive when there's a new game, certainly if I don't understand when it's like, hexes? What's hexes, precious? But I really enjoyed playing it, and the fact it's a solo option as well means I can just chill out at home and play. It's all I do all day, sit at home and play myself. No, again, that sounds weird. Stop making it weird, Peach. But as always, a big thank you to my patrons. You people are beautiful, beautiful people. I love you very much. Without you, Peachy Tips wouldn't exist. It would just be Peachy with Anywhere to Aries tips. I'll just be at home just like telling Liz about all the different ways she can paint models. And she won't paint models because, well, she can paint models. She has painted models in the past. It's testament to the psyche of a wife of the hobby, a widow of the hobby, is she'll watch me paint and then she'll go, oh, I'll have a go at painting a rat skin. She painted a rat skin, right? A rat skin from Necromunda when we were like 17, 18. And I was like, oh, look, I've been painting these for years, been doing this for decades. And then she comes along, paints a rat skin, does a little swallow tattoo on it, gets the eyes, nails the eyes straight away. I was so disgusted and disappointed. I was like, oh, she's so much better at painting than I am. She's better at making teas than I am. She's everything better than me, really. Bet she can't fire 3 rounds a minute in any weather, though. Bet she can't do that. I know I can't. I know Sharp can. But yeah, waffled on enough. As always, I'm just waffling, just to let the names go by. That's the point. But just want to say one last thing. Stay safe, folks at Signum Games. Stay safe, everybody. And thanks for stopping by. See you later. Bye. Love you all. Right, I'm going to go make a cup of tea because that one's gone cold. And it made me sad because I drank it and it was so cold, it nearly made me retch and spit all over the camera. And no one needed to see that. So, yeah, I'm going to get a hot tea now. Love you all. Bye.